Hello and welcome to your WION live broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Egan and these are the headlines. No end to Rishi Sunak's woes. Even after sacking Nadhim Zahawi over his tax bunglings, reports say opposition now set to turn up the heat on Sunak over links to the BBC chief Richard Sharp. Germany rues Ukraine's call for fighter jets after tanks. Russian pounds the Kharkiv region, and there's no end to the Russia-Ukraine blame game. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says Russian President Vladimir Putin threatened him with a missile strike a minute away during pre-war talks between the two leaders. Novak Djokovic says he isn't done yet and vows to return for the Australian Open next year after winning a record-equalling 22nd Grand Slam title. Pressure piles on British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Sunak's move to sack the Conservative Party chairman Nadhim Zahawi over his murky tax affairs has invited strong reaction from his party members and the opposition. In a public letter, Rishi Sunak claimed Zahawi committed a serious breach in the ministerial
Far from soft on crime, I ran the Crown prosecution.
Laurie Magnus found that Zahawi led to two consecutive Conservative leaders and he misled them when they came under investigation by the UK Tax Authority. The inquiry report stated that Zahawi failed to be honest, open and an exemplary leader through his own behaviour. Opposition leaders have turned up the heat on Sunak, saying Zahawi was appointed despite Sunak knowing of deep wrongdoing.
He knew there were allegations about Zahawi for a long time. He then knew that Zahawi had been negotiating a deal with HMRC at the same time as he was in charge of HMRC as the Chancellor. So I think the biggest question today isn't actually for Zahawi, it's actually for the Prime Minister.
In a separate probe, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is accused of appointing Richard Sharp as the BBC chair in exchange of securing a private credit line of up to $990,000. Experts predict Sharp could be the next in line as the opposition prepares to attack him and through Rishi Sunak himself. Some analysts even say that the final target may be the Prime Minister. Sunak has faced questions about his own family's tax affairs. His wife enjoyed non-domicile status for years, was automatically shielded from paying UK taxes. Last week, Sunak apologised for receiving his second police fine after he was filmed not wearing a seatbelt in a moving car. And not to forget the ongoing industrial action in key sectors in the UK, which has put a lot of pressure on the National Health Service or the NHS. And now Rishi Sunak has to get his UK premiership back on track. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Nigel Fletcher, political analyst, joining us live from London. Dr. Nigel, we obviously saw Sunak make that decision to sack Zahawi. What kind of damage has this caused his premiership? And also, what can we expect in the coming days and weeks with this other scandal involving Boris Johnson?
Good morning. Well, yes, I think it has caused damage to the government. Any story that has sort of rumbled on for this long will have done so. I think, as I said last time I was on, I think that this is something which perhaps Rishi Sunak will be feeling particularly angry about, because it does seem from the facts that we've seen so far that that he was misled, or at least not informed about the status of Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs. There is a principle in the UK of taxpayer confidentiality, and I think quite a lot of people will be surprised that that has been taken to the extent that it has been, in the sense that even when a minister was being appointed to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, this wasn't something that was flagged up as far as we know. The letter from the Prime Minister's advisor on ministerial interest, the letter which triggered the resignation, sets out the details of his investigation, and he was able to speak to HMRC. But even within that, it says that, you know, there is a degree of privacy attached to tax affairs. But I think people will be surprised that in the systems that are in place for checking out whether ministers are appropriate to be appointed, that this wasn't something that was able to be flagged up, certainly on his appointment as Chancellor.
And of course, the vultures are surrounding the Prime Minister himself as well, because obviously we've had that previous situation with his wife and her non-dom status. And of course, Rishi Sunak was a very successful businessman prior to going into politics. And if there's any skeletons in his closet, surely they're going to come out during this period as well.
Yes, I think this is the danger for the Prime Minister. It was notable during Prime Minister's questions last week that the opposition leader, Keir Starmer, made a point of making a generalised statement about individuals who perhaps haven't paid their taxes being responsible for public money. And of course he was referring primarily to Nadhim Zahawi, but it was notable that he made the reference to any minister who is not paying their taxes being responsible. And I think, you know, that was something which was designed to be a shot across the bow of the Prime Minister, because, as you say, there have been these questions. He is a very wealthy man. There's no getting around that. And there has been the controversy over his wife's tax affairs. And so I think certainly this is a case of the opposition trying to find more angles to pursue this story. And of course, the press will do the same. I think that's the danger for Rishi Sunak, is that this is not an issue on which he has a completely unblemished record. There's no suggestion of any wrongdoing on his part of the same type. But of course, being a wealthy man, these are questions that will be asked. And I think it's notable that there is that slightly ominous tone from Sir Keir Starmer that we heard at Prime Minister's questions, where he's clearly making this a more generalised argument rather than just focusing on Nadhim Zahawi, who of course has now resigned.
Dr. Nigel Fletcher, political analyst, many thanks for your insight. After Patriot missiles and tanks, Ukraine now wants Western fighter jets. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged Western nations to speed up deliveries of new and existing weapons. This comes as Ukraine is facing a tough situation in the Donetsk region, which is under constant Russian shelling. The appeal for new weapons has received an early setback. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has refused to supply fighter jets to Ukraine. This came after Ukraine had called for the creation of a fighter jet coalition to strengthen air defence capabilities. Earlier, NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg also urged South Korea to increase military support to Ukraine. Stoltenberg is in Seoul with a focus on strengthening ties with US allies in the face of the war in Ukraine and rising competition with China. He said it's extremely important that Russia doesn't win the war to avoid sending a wrong message to authoritarian leaders. Meanwhile, in Kherson, Russian missile strikes killed 3 people in a fresh round of strikes on Sunday. This comes as the fighting rages on in the Donetsk region. In Kharkiv, a missile hit an apartment building on Sunday. According to the regional governor, the attack killed 1 person and injured several people.
I was in my bed and I was thinking, and suddenly such a strong force swept me up. I flew out of my bed right into the kitchen. How I was not killed, I do not know.
There's also a counter-blame game underway. Russia has accused Ukraine of deliberately striking a hospital in a Russian-held area of eastern Ukraine. According to Russia, the alleged war crime killed 14 people and wounded 24 patients and medical staff. Meanwhile, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister says it's quite possible the New START nuclear arms control treaty with the United States would end after 2026. Russia-US talks on resuming inspections under the New START treaty were called off at the last minute in November 2022, and neither side has agreed on a new timescale for the new talks. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has claimed that the Russian President Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him with a missile. According to reports, the apparent threat came in a phone call just ahead of the Ukraine invasion last year. The then UK Prime Minister has alleged that the Russian leader told him that if he did not want him to hurt him, a missile would only take a minute. These claims by Johnson are part of a new BBC series that looks into how the West grappled with Putin in the years before the war. The former UK PM recalled on how during his visit to Kiev, he had warned Putin that an invasion of Ukraine would be disastrous and that there would be tough Western sanctions on Russia if he did so earlier this month. Johnson made a surprise visit to Ukraine earlier this month. The former Prime Minister said that it was a privilege to be invited to the war-torn nation by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, with whom he had a close working relationship during his time in office.
Now you're too kind. Bivouacs and a spear carrier. I will do whatever I can.
Students in the UK will soon be victims of industrial action. 4.5 million students from 23,000 schools may be sent home this week, as up to 150,000 teachers could be out on strike over pay. Members of the National Education Union, the NEU, in England and Wales demand above inflation pay rises. According to reports, around 90% of the NEU's 300,000 members voted for Wednesday's walkout, and the turnout was 53%. According to a report by The Times, most schools impacted will be completely shut. Union chiefs say leaders will try to negotiate the strike with Education Secretary Gillian Keegan in last-minute efforts to avoid strike action. The action will be the first of 7 days of strike chaos, which is planned by NEU teachers in England and Wales throughout February and March.
Out here to defend our pensions, and we all know we've been hit.
Well, for more on this, our correspondent Alex Isaac joins us live from London. Alex, what are the chances that these talks could lead to some breakthrough and that these strikes will be called off?
Well, it's quite unlikely, to be honest. Gillian Keegan is meeting with the representatives for NEU right as we speak at the moment. But it all comes down to, as many of the other strike issues are, about pay. And the government has said over and over again that there is no extra money in the pot to give all of these public services. So we are really at a stalemate here. And Wednesday we're going to be seeing not just this potential teachers' strike, but a whole host of strikes that are on the streets, including ambulances, staff as well, NHS workers. So we're going to see a lot of disruption on Wednesday. The schools themselves, so this is the NEU, but last month we had a strike that was called off from the NASWUT, so that's another teachers union. Their members said that they didn't want to strike, and we did hear back then that some of those union members had actually moved across to the NEU because they did want to start striking. They do believe that it's only fair that they should get an extra pay rise to be in line with inflation. But as we keep hearing again from the government, that the inflation needs to come down first before there's any discussion about pay at all. Now, we are also expecting later today that Labour will be also trying to stop some of these anti-strike bills going through. They're saying that it's still against our human rights to try and force basic staffing to be across all of those industries. But that is still going through the Commons at the moment, and that is still under discussion. None of that will affect, of course, Wednesday's general strike. But we will hear later today whether any of the talks have been successful between the Education Minister, Gillian Keegan, and the NEU later today.
Alex Isaac joining us live from London. Many thanks. It's public rights versus maintaining order in the UK. Britain's new public order bill that looks to ban disruptive protests is facing stiff opposition. Rights activists from Hong Kong living in the UK have compared the bill to repressive measures by China in their own country. The bill goes through the report stage in the House of Lords today. Hong Kong nationals living in Britain term the new bill a threat to their right to protest, particularly against China's crackdown in their home country. The group Democracy for Hong Kong has been staging protests around Britain to send out a message on Chinese repression in Hong Kong. The group wrote to Home Secretary Suella Braverman and expressed concern on two aspects of the bill. One, serious disruption prevention orders or SDPOs, and two, stop and search powers. They say they had come to Britain in the hope of a better life and to exercise their rights and freedoms without fear. The public order bill seeks to give police the powers they need to prevent and respond to guerrilla tactics that they believe cause misery to the hard-working public. The bill is explicitly targeting climate and cost of living protests around Britain. The Joint Committee on Human Rights called for key measures to be watered down or scrapped as it would curtail legitimate democratic rights.
Workers take another pay cut.
Philips has joined the League of Companies that are going for job cuts to maintain profitability. The Dutch health tech firm would scrap 6,000 jobs, and while half of the job cuts will be made this year, the other half will be realised by 2025. The company has estimated the reduced workforce should lead to a low teens profit margin by 2025 and a mid to high teens margin beyond that year, with mid-single digit comparable sales growth throughout. Philips has been hit by a massive recall of its respiratory devices that has eroded 70% of its market value. Millions of ventilators used to treat sleep apnea were recalled over worries that foam used in the machines could become toxic. In addition to the massive recall, a shortage of components has troubled Philips throughout last year, decreasing its sales by 3% over the whole of 2022. This is the second time in the last 6 months Philips is choosing to do massive job cuts. The company in October last year announced a reduction in its workforce by 5% or 4,000 jobs. The supply chain scenario has still not improved, and Philips said the supply chain remained challenging and would only further improve gradually. Taylor Swift has once again won hearts. Any guesses why? Well, the Grammy award-winning singer has taken a trans model as her love interest in her new music video. Taylor Swift released a new music video over the weekend featuring a transgender man as her love interest. The Lavender Haze video, written and directed by Swift, features transgender male model Laith Ashley as her love interest. Fans and activists praised Swift for including a transgender man in her video and for her advocacy work on behalf of the LGBTQ community. A social media user wrote, and we quote, "Taylor Swift has made a lot of political missteps in her career, but casting a Dominican trans man as her love interest is commendable." Another user wrote, and we quote, "This comes at a time when powerful anti-trans forces worldwide are crusading against the very existence of trans people." Over the last couple of years, Swift has been using the power of her stardom to help fight injustice, taking strong political stances against systematic racism, police brutality and discrimination. In 2020, the singer also vowed to always be an advocate for equality and love. Liverpool will not be returning to Wembley to defend their FA Cup title as their poor campaign suffered another blow. The Reds were knocked out by Brighton and Hove Albion in the fourth round of the FA Cup after a last-gasp winner by Japanese winger Kaoru Mitoma. The Seagulls had defeated Jurgen Klopp's side 3-0 just 2 weeks ago in the Premier League, and Brighton came close to breaking the deadlock in the 15th minute. Irish striker Evan Ferguson had his shot cleared off the line by Liverpool defender Trent Alexander-Arnold. Brighton matched the visitors in terms of chances and possession, but Liverpool opened the scoring when forward Mohamed Salah charged on the right flank and found Harvey Elliott in the box, who slotted home in the 30th minute. The hosts responded with an equaliser 10 minutes later when defender Tariq Lamptey's shot from distance took a big deflection off Lewis Dunk and flew into the back of the net. Both the sides were unable to find a winner in the second half, and it seemed like a replay at Anfield would be needed to decide the tie, but Mitoma had other plans. The informed Japanese winger brilliantly controlled a pass from Ecuadorian left-back Pervis Estepinian and weaved his way to fire past Alisson Becker to snatch a victory in stoppage time. Liverpool are 9th in the league, and with this loss their only chance of silverware this season now lies in the Champions League, where they face a daunting task facing the title holders Real Madrid in the round of 16.
We have to build on these kind of things. We have to improve. We have to do better body language. A couple of boys have to be much better. Defending of in the formation has to be better from a few. And but then I think last game here we couldn't have won. There's no chance. We were like, okay, I was happy that we didn't get more. I think today nobody would have been surprised if we win this game. So it's not anything, oh my God, how did that happen? So that's good. But for today and for the competition, not good enough, and that's why we're out.
Excitement and nostalgia filled the atmosphere as gleaming vintage cars rang in old times at a rally in India's Kolkata city. Hundreds of auto enthusiasts gather every year at the Vintage Car Rally, organised by the Automobile Association of Eastern India. Well, that's all from your WION live broadcast. In London, I've been Oliver Regan. See you at the same time tomorrow.
Additional drink, Arab?